Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and a very warm welcome to another session of Ask Dr. Saleem. In this series, we take your questions and we post them to Dr. Saleem. Now, if you have any questions, you can either raise your hand to ask your questions through the React button or post your questions in the chat. And you may ask your questions in either English or Urdu. However, the answers will be given in English unless specified otherwise. So you may request your answer to be given in Urdu. And with that, we'll start with our first question coming from Ammar Rasool. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab.
Walaikum assalam.
Dr. Sahab, my question specifically is regarding these two ayats which make me think a lot about what God might be saying through these. One is that we do not put a burden on a soul or somebody more than they can bear. And the second ayat is that with every difficulty there is ease. And these both ayats, many different people have many different meanings that they derive from it, and they are used in different circumstances. But I specifically want to talk about somebody who is in unimaginably extreme pain or suffering. For example, a Palestinian child. Obviously they are being burdened with more than they can bear, and obviously there seems to be no respite or happiness with their pain. So in that circumstance, the conventional or the straightforward meaning of these ayats just falls flat and they make no sense. Please, sir, if you could guide about what you feel their meanings are. Thank you.
Yes, so as far as the first of these verses is concerned, La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha, in general context, it does not relate to the fact that God is not going to burden the person beyond his capacity. That is something which is otherwise understood. What it states here is that God will not give you a directive of the Sharia which is beyond your capacity to fulfill, and this is in contradistinction and comparison to the Jews of the who of course were given certain directives as punishment, which were beyond their capacity to actually follow. So this is a special favor to this ummah that as a prayer, it is something that the Prophet also made, that please do not burden us with directives which are beyond our capacity. And this is in relation to, as I said, that the Jews were burdened with certain directives that were beyond their capacity, and the Quran actually gave a reason for that also, and it was zalika bibaghihim, zalika jazainahum bibaghihim, which means that this is the punishment that we gave them because of their baghi, because of their rebelliousness. So this is how this verse generally occurs. But other than that, this is also a common sense conclusion that you can draw, that people are not they are not actually burdened with things that are beyond their capacity so as to necessitate suicide. I mean, this is another extreme form, because a lot of people they are not able to bear the burden, or they may be this is how we portray it, that they are not able to bear the burden. But in the Sharia of God and in the law of God, the thing is that at times we are not able to fight it out enough, and we lose heart too early. So in principle, God says that whatever circumstances that you are put through, except if they are a means of punishment, they are something that you can bear. They are not something which are beyond your capacity. As I said, this is more of a common sense conclusion, not drawn directly from this verse, but from other verses of the Quran. And as far as the other verse is concerned, and what was the other verse? What was the other question?
So the other verse was that with every hardship there is ease.
Yes, so that verse of Surah Al-Nashra is Inna ma'al usri yusra wa inna ma'al usri yusra. This is something specifically related to the Prophet. It's not a general rule. If you look at the context, Surah Al-Nashra is basically trying to assure and allay the fears of the Prophet, and he's being told Innama al-usra, innama hazal usr ba'da yusra. After this particular adversity that you are facing, there is an alif lam with usr. The meaning which generally people have adopted is, in that case, the words should have been innama usra yusra. There should not have been an alif lam with al usr. So the al usr is specifying that the adversity which the Prophet is now facing is soon going to go away because God is going to be his helper. Yes, these are testing times for him, but ultimately he will prevail. And then the verse is repeated again to assure the Prophet. So Surah Alam Nashra and Surah Wazuha, these are two paired surahs. If you look at them, they don't have any relation with the with general Muslims as such. They are meant to sound assurance to Prophet Muhammad. And as far as the first verse is concerned, as I said, generally wherever it occurs in the Quran, it is mostly to dispel the notion that some directives of the Sharia are beyond our capacity. I mean, we cannot simply fulfill them. But and the third thing which I just said was that as far as this is concerned, that there are certain circumstances which become unbearable, then do remember that they might look to be unbearable, but in fact, God sets them to us as trials and as tribulations, and we need to uh, push ourselves and rise to the occasion. And instead of running away, instead of maybe, getting dejected or even go as far as to end our lives, we have to stand ground, because remember, circumstances are such that they change as well. If you stand on your feet, if you face these adversities, then another thing happens, and that is God's help. So he's just checking whether things, if they get beyond your capacity or maybe something which is just too much for you to bear, it is only that small bit of thing which God just wants to see whether when a person is stretched to his limit, what does he do? So what actually happens is that well before the limit or maybe close to the limit, people either feel that they cannot go along, or people who look at them feel that, I mean, this is too hard for them. Otherwise, as I said, as soon as that threshold is reached, which means that a person, it cannot go beyond their capacity, I can tell you that it is at this instance that God's help appears and things start to become easier. Let's go to next segment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, मेरे 4 साल बेटे ने आज सुबह इतनी अपनी मर्द. Basically, they're asking, because I read this before, वो बच्चा पूछता है अपने मम्मा से, हम लोग असली हैं या नकली? और फिर मम्मा बोलती हैं कि वो लोग असली हैं. तो तब वो दूसरा सवाल पूछता है कि हमें किसने बनाया? तो क्वेश्चनर का सवाल यह है कि इस उम्र में एक 4 साल के बच्चे के लिए ऐसे सवालात करना क्या नॉर्मल सी बात है? क्या इस उम्र में बच्चे की जबान इस काबिल होती है कि वो इस तरह के सवालात कर सके?
Oh yes, I've seen even younger people, younger boys or girls, even a 3-year-old, 3.5-year-old, because you see, because of the information explosion or knowledge explosion which is going around them, if a child has an iPad with him or her and he or she is browsing at the age of 2.5, so you'll see all kinds of information. They come to their knowledge, and of course they also listen to their parents and to people around them. They also watch TV, etc. Social media and all these things, they educate them well before people were educated in yesteryears. So yes, this is very much normal. You don't have to be worried about that. And I mean, just you need to be sanely treating your children in a way that their questions are answered. Of course, there are certain things that you cannot make them understand at a very young age, but you can give some answers which can, at their age, are able to grasp the concept of God or anything which is normally beyond observation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Naushad Shafkat, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Yes, Dr. I seek apologies for prefacing my questions with a slightly long harangue. Sir, my question is relating to the hadith. There is a hadith of the Prophet prohibiting the Sahaba from spreading his sayings, but that was only during the time that the Quran was being revealed, as you have several times stated. Later on, he said that you can now spread my word, but just be careful that if anybody attributes something falsely to me, he has a house prepared in hell for himself. Now, Doctor, Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq is possibly the only person who has spent the longest period of time with the Prophet, both before his prophethood and right up
Mm-hmm.
to the end. He is reported to have compiled a small booklet of the hadith
Mm-hmm.
and gave it to his daughter, and next day in the morning asked it to be brought to him, and he burnt it,
Right.
saying that he feared that
Mm-hmm.
he might attribute something wrongly to the Prophet.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
on the other hand, we have Hazrat Abu Huraira, who became a
Mm-hmm.
Muslim in the 7th century, 7th Hijri, and
Mm-hmm.
spent less than 4 years with the Prophet. But he is
Mm-hmm.
reported to have narrated about 5,000 plus hadiths.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they've been repeated and the number could be slightly lower. And then
Mm-hmm.
also I heard Ghamidi Saab mentioning that he used to hold regular daily sessions during the time of
Mm-hmm.
Hazrat Usman,
Mm-hmm.
narrating hadiths every evening to those
Mm-hmm.
who came to
Mm-hmm.
listen to him. And once he was asked that if did you also do this same practice during the time of Hazrat Umar, he said I would have been skinned alive if I had done it during the time of Umar. Now,
Mm-hmm.
how do we take it? Number one is Hazrat Abu Bakr. He knew that what was restraining him was the saying of the Prophet that if anybody falsely attributes something to me,
Mm-hmm.
but yet he didn't, allow publish that book. And on the other hand, Abu Huraira, who spent less than 4 years narrating 5,000 hadiths, which is 1,000 hadiths a year for every year that he spent.
Mm-hmm.
That means about 4 or 5 hadiths per day.
Mm-hmm.
How do we take the hadiths coming down to us from Hazrat Abu Huraira?
Well, I think we have to view our hadith with a pinch of salt, and meaning that you see, Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu was extremely careful and maybe very precautious because he thought that maybe something that he has heard from the Prophet may not be, uh, absolutely the same as he might have understood. Because remember, a lot of hadiths that we have today, they are not verbatim. They're not, cited in the same words. So it's basically
Right.
the understanding of the narrator that is transmitted. So
Absolutely.
this makes people very anxious, and I think a person like Abu Bakr was right in this regard because being the first companion of the Prophet and like a lifelong companion, in fact, he knew that although he was like with him like a shadow, but still because he was narrating many things out of his own, you can say, memory or understanding, so there could have been some difference. But having said that, we still have narratives from Abu Bakr and who you can see them in various books of hadith, and so it's not. What you can say is that he did, burn the personally compiled anthology. But on the other hand, there are about 40 to 50 narratives which we still find in the Musnad of Ahmed ibn Hanbal and other books that are attributed to him and in which he is actually narrating something from the Prophet. So, yes, it could be it's like a mixture of being very cautious that if you're responsible for something, then you feel overcautious. But when other people are narrating from you, what you're saying, then obviously it is the responsibility of other people as well. And Abu Huraira or other people like Abdullah ibn Umar or even Hazrat Aisha Ta'ala Anha. So these are narrators who cited scores of narratives on the Prophet. And that too is something which is very, I would say, helpful because the knowledge of the Prophet was transmitted through these narratives. Had nothing been transmitted, religion would have still been preserved because the Quran and Sunnah are the original sources. And this is what Abu Bakr made assured. He was assured because if he even narrates nothing from his own self, he knew that there are other people narrating, and he also knew that the Quran and Sunnah, which are the original sources, they are absolutely preserved. So other narrators like Abu Huraira and, as I said, some of the other Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Umar, etc. So they transmitted a very large quantity of the knowledge of the Prophet, which was very helpful because one of the greatest things that we have got to know from these hadith literature is the ijtihads of the Prophet himself, how he would at times take a certain decision when he would not find an explicit directive of religion available to him. And there are scores of examples of his ijtihadat or his ijtihads which are cited in hadith literature. But in effect, you can also say that because this hadith literature is something about whom every knowledgeable scholar of religion knew that they are not going to be accepted per se. They will be critically evaluated, they will be critically analyzed, and only if the transmitted thing is understood to be in accordance with the Quran, Sunnah, established principles, intellect, common sense, human nature, established history, only then will it be accepted. So you see, there was a sieve through which these narratives had to pass, and that is what made them confident. More than that, you'll also see that uh, personally, I think there are about 96% or 95% of the narratives from the Prophet are what we call as rawayat bil ma'na, which means it is the understanding of the narrator which has been transmitted. And this is not just one narrator. The first narrator understood something, he passed it on to the second narrator, and then he understood something from the first, and it could have undergone some modifications or maybe some additions, and this remained until the compiler or the person who compiled the anthology, like Imam Bukhari or the rest, were the ones who just recorded whatever reached them through 4, 5, or 6 sections. And the 4% I just talked about were other narratives which were transmitted verbatim. And these are of two types. So if you look at the supplications of the Prophet, so most of them are verbatim. And they are so beautifully transmitted. If you look at those verbatim translations and du'as and supplications, that, I mean, your heart leaps out, it springs forth to say, yes, only the Prophet could have said these words. Look at the dua of going to bed. Allahumma aslamtu nafsi ilayk, wa fajjahtu wajhi ilayk, wa fawwaztu amri ilayk. I mean, these are so enchanting words that they are not only music to the ears, but they just they pin in themselves in your heart as well. So one of the verbatim sayings are these, which I just said, that they are the supplications of the Prophet that are very helpful. And the other are certain proverbial sayings of the Prophet, like he said, "Wa'istoli utamim al-akhlaq," that I have been sent to complete the pinnacle of morality. Or he said that inna min khayarikum ahasanakum akhlaqan, the best of you are those who are morally best. And similarly, you'll find so many one-liners from him. Because of the fact that they were one-liners, they were easily preserved in memory as well and transmitted. So these one-liners and these supplications, they are a very, very, I would say, profoundly effective repertoire and reservoir of some of the things that the Prophet said. And the remaining 95 or 96%, as I said, they reflect the ijtihadats of the Prophet, they reflect his life, the way he spent it. They also reflect the history of that era. They also reflect his attitude towards companions. For example, one thing that you can easily see if you look through this hadith literature is that he would address different companions regarding the same issue in different words. He knew that what was to be said to Abdullah ibn Umar and what was not to be said to, for example, Abu Zar, because he knew that although the question is the same, but the answer has to be given according to the understanding and capacity of the Sahabi in question. So this also shows his tremendous wisdom, how he dealt with his students who were the Sahaba. Similarly, we know also that there were so many things in which the Sahaba differed with him. I mean, especially when they got to know that this was something that was not from Wahi. So we know in the Battle of Badr that Habab ibn Munzir, he came forward because it was in the Battle of Uhud. The prophetic army, the Prophet said that we will encamp at a certain place, and Habab came forward and asked the Prophet that, well, are you saying this out of your understanding, or is it God's guidance? It is Wahi that you are saying this. And the Prophet said, this is my opinion. So Habab said, well, if this is your opinion, then I beg to differ with you. This is not the right place that you have chosen. Instead of this place, because it has this and this and this demerit, let's go to that place. And the Prophet listened to him actually. Similarly, if you look at the Quran, you'll find the Prophet, I mean the Sahaba, I mean they knew that when they were differing in matters of non-Wahi. For example, in the case of the marriage of Zainab bint Jahash to Zayd ibn Harisa, the Prophet did not want Zayd ibn Harisa to divorce Zainab. And this is said in the Quran in very explicit words. Is the hulu, when the words are like this, that amsik zawjak, that just don't divorce your wife, which is a very strongly worded sentence. But what happened? Zayd did not listen to him, and he ended up divorcing Zainab bint Jahash because he knew that this was something of a advice from the Prophet. And an advice is an advice. I mean, you can respectfully disagree with it also, which actually gives us this beautiful, I would say, stature and conduct of these people, that they knew that they could still differ with the Prophet if what he was saying was something that related to strategy. And I can add some more to this as well, but just to sum up, you see, a lot of these ijtihadats and happenings and history has been transmitted. Now, the thing is that what has caused this consternation and commotion is perhaps the fact that there was a stream, and there was a period in the 3rd century when and scores of ahadiths were concocted. They were fabricated. And because of this fabrication, there was a large scale, I would say, disparaging element that was added. And hence, we see that the scholars of hadith, they rose up to this challenge. And what they did was, it was at this time that they actually came forth with these barometers and standards of judging hadith literature, and they said that, well, because of the fact that we are finding this large scale fabrication, that people are just narrating, and just to add stress and emphasis, they say that, well, this is something that has been said by the Prophet. And of course, what they would be saying would not be something very much against religion. It would be, I mean, something that was too fantastic and something that would urge people to do righteous deeds. Of course, these righteous deeds were overboard at times. So in order to restore that balance also, so these muhaddisun, they came forward. And I can tell you out of my own study, and I think every person who has studied hadith will tell you, that one of the outstanding disciplines which Muslims have invented, remember, this is a discipline which Muslims have invented. They are the pioneers of this, is the science of Rijal, the science of the biographies of narrators. So they traveled vast areas in the first 3 or 4 centuries, because when they saw that people were ascribing things to the Prophet, and also there were people who were saying certain things, so they traveled far and wide, as far as Samarkand in the east, and then to Spain in the west, etc., to find out if there were people who were saying something, and they could evaluate it. So this is something that made them realize that, of course, on the one hand, we have a lot of treasure from the Prophet in the form of his du'as and supplication, in the form of the proverbial statement that he has made, in the form of his ijtihadat. But on the other hand, we have this large-scale concoction. So I think it's just a question of being more attentive to narratives which are rightly reported, that can give you a lot of insight in how the Prophet conducted himself, how he made himself available to his people. And in fact, as we know from the Quran, that his seerah, his biography, his own biography, the Quran is one of the best reflections of his own biography. But hadith literature also has a lot to say about his character, about his conduct, the way he conducted himself. Because you see, the Quran is confined to a certain format, also a certain theme, a certain subject matter. So I've seen books of hadith of Quran that basically say that this is the seerah of the Prophet based on the Quran. So we will just have the Quranic seerah of the Prophet, which of course is something very valuable. A lot of people have written such tomes. But on the other hand, historical anecdotes, historical happenings that help us understand and navigate through many problems in life are ones that have come down in the form of indirect narrations, which mean that they are not the same wording that the Prophet said, but yes, they are the understanding of the ravis or the narrators. But as I said, that understanding is something about which these muhaddisun have also said. So this is a famous ascription to all the muhaddisun. They say that يحتمل الصدق والكذب about al-akhbar al-ahad. They say that there is a probability that they can be correct, and there is a probability that they can be incorrect. So the thing is to properly evaluate them. So I think if they are properly evaluated, if these are hadiths that are spurious and inauthentic, they are sifted out. And by the way, this is one of the projects which Mawrid has been conducting for the past 7 or 8 years. We've just published a book on hadiths, which is the narratives of the Prophet, just the first volume. And there are 3 other volumes coming up, which are those narratives which have been rejected, or they have been sifted out from these current collections, and the reasons have also been given, so that on the one hand we have a positive collection, which of course would be quite a voluminous collection, and on the other hand we'll have a collection, so to speak, which would be a negative collection, or it will be a list of narratives about which people would be, I would say, forewarned that these are inauthentically ascribed to the Prophet. But because of the fact that a lot of sermon givers, a lot of people who stand on the pulpit, they use all kinds of material to convey certain things. And because these have become very popular, but beware that they are not authentic. So that's another exercise that is being done. And we are not the first ones to do it. In the past, lots of scholars of hadith literature have done this, and they are still doing it. It's just a question of deeply understanding the pros and cons of these narratives, and I personally feel that the pros are much more than the cons, and it's just a question of judicially reading and accepting them.
Thank you so much.
Sir, can I say something? Thank you so much for such an illuminating answer. Asked this question because I started reading that book Ilmun Nabi, Volume One, of which has been published, and still I feel that Hazrat Abu Bakr uh, would definitely not wrongly attribute anything to the Prophet. And I also appreciate very much and thank you for the comment that we need to take the hadiths with a pinch of salt, which have been narrated in such large numbers. Thank you very much, sir. Such an illuminating and probably the longest answer you've given to any student so far. I'm honored. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question comes from Ammar Rasul. Please go ahead.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum again, Dr. Sahab. Dr. Sahab, my question is a lot of modern scholars these days, especially I am referring to Sheikh Hamza, this American Californian scholar. He often describes this, code in the Quran where he says that, God clearly states that if you want more blessings in life, if you want, God's good grace in life, then you have to be thankful, and God clearly promises that in the Quran, that if you are thankful to me, then I will give you more. I was very recently listening to a video by Ghamidi Saab about the story of Dr. Yunus, and I was it struck me that in that story, God very clearly goes against His own promise that He has made, in the Quran. Is it the case that that promise comes only in the Quran and it did not apply to previous people? But that's not the totality of the question. What I also want to ask is that the story says that there were people who were saying, what's the big deal in his thankfulness when you have given him so much? And then he said that these people were inspired by Satan to say these things. So my second question is, why was God listening to these people or listening to Satan in a matter of His own prophet, and why did He put one of His own very dear people through so much suffering just because Satan was saying something? And so my final part of this question is, it makes somebody like me afraid. I have a very blessed life, and I thank God for this blessed life, and I have been taught by you and other scholars to do so all the time. Yet, I don't want to be in a situation where God thinks, where God will think, you are being thankful because you have been given so much. Let's see if I take most of these things away from you, and then I will see if you are still thankful. Thank you very much, sir.
So first, there's a small correction. This is not Prophet Yunus; it is Prophet Job, which is Ayub.
Yes, sir, sorry.
I heard. Yes. So you see, you'll find his story in detail in the book of Job in the Bible. That is, you can see it and read it anytime. But more than that, in the Quran, you'll find him in Surah Swad, in Surah Anbiya. And the thing is that it was not as much as listening to Satan, as much as making him an example in front of the believers. That seems to be the reason why God chose this. Because you see, people like Satan, or people who were his accomplices and associates, they have been saying these things to all the prophets. It's not just him that they say this, but it does seem that amongst the prophets of God, he had this distinction that he was a very well set and a very well off person. I mean, contrary to some of the prophets who were at times personally pushed, but he was someone who had he was very well placed, and he had lots of treasures and wealth. And it does seem that God wanted to make this example that even people who are blessed with wealth, and if you look at the scripture of Job, you'll be astonished the wealth that has been depicted there, the amounts of servants that he would have, and the amount of gold and silver, and all these things are mentioned in a lot of detail. Not that I am saying that all of them is true, but it does give a reasonable idea of his lifestyle. So just this God also wanted him to be made an example in front of the believers, that even a person who is as rich, because you see, it does come make its point that at times people who live in riches and who live in luxury, they are very soft-hearted, they are very faint-hearted, in fact, and they are like, they are not able to resonate with the common man because of the fact that they have been brought up in luxury. So it was to make people realize that even if they are brought up in luxury, prophets of God, they are not, people who should be measured by these by this paraphernalia that they have. It is their own character that has made them eligible to be a prophet of God. So don't think that Job, if he had this all these blessings, then he was someone who was a faint-hearted, or he didn't have the mettle. So I think it was for this reason that he was made an example, and the way he fulfilled God's, he passed through the trial in flying colors. Again, as I said, in the Quran, it's very briefly referred to, but if you look at the scripture of Job, the book of Job in the Bible, you'll see how he was terribly afflicted with certain physical ailments, and you see that there were certain insects that started to crawl. They went into his skin, and it was so painful that he would scream at times, and he would implore to God. We also have the Quran saying this, and he remained steadfast. He never complained that God, I was brought up in luxury, and now I'm facing this problem. It was not like that. And the believers saw this, and of course those who were who were still, they were skeptical. They also saw him, and they saw a servant of God going through so much and still ending up as a thankful person, telling people that, well, if my God has put me through this trial, that I'm going to try to prove myself equal to this trial. So that is how I understand it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, nowadays in Canada, we hardly have 4 hours between Dhuhr and Maghrib
Right.
here.
Mhm.
So, and since we're busy on our daily lives, is it okay to combine Dhuhr and Asr every day?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last part.
Is it okay to combine Dhuhr and Asr every day?
So let me just tell you this, that combining prayers is a decision that you have to take yourself. It cannot be, in trust. I just cannot tell you it as a rule of thumb. You see, these are spontaneous decisions that you need to make in the wake of the fact that you are pushed. You see, there's a independent permanent principle which says that God does not want to make things difficult for you. Exactly the one that we discussed earlier on, La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha. Or in the case of ibadat, the Quran has said, yuridullahu bikumul yusra wala yuridu bikumul usra. God wants ease for you. So under that formula, I would say, if you feel that this is something that is pushing you too far, you are not being able to do that, then of course you can. And there could be other people who could do that, who could still follow the same routine in spite of the fact that there are 4 daylight hours, or 4 hours between Zohar and Maghrib. Maybe they can still offer those 4 prayers. So I think it's something that a person should decide for herself or himself. The bottom line is that in cases of extreme inapplicability of a directive, you can make a you can make a compromise. I would say you can. This is a concession that you can take for your own self. But as I said, the decision has to come from the person himself, keeping in view the fact that, well, things have become so difficult at this time that I just cannot. It's difficult for me to follow. So if that is something that you come up with, that's perfectly okay. But there could be other people who would say that, well, in spite of the difficulty, I can still go and pray these or offer these 4 prayers or 3 prayers, even if they are 4 hours. So I think it's like an individual decision, and the principle is just what I have just presented before you.
Does choosing the more difficult path result in higher reward from Allah?
It depends on the circumstances. It's not always the case. You see, for example, if you are trying to maybe set an example before people who are very slack, that could be more rewarding. But on the other hand, if you're trying to set an example before children or the next generation, so that For them, it becomes easier to follow religion. It could be the other way around. So this is something situational. Earning more reward or less reward for the same thing done in different circumstances is always situational. And at times you would prefer something, and at times you would not.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Kamran Khan, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad, and thanks for your valuable information. So my question regarding how to educate our some of our youth, including my children. They are like teenagers and youth. So a very common question they sometimes and ask or they refer to it, that how the knowledge of God works at the same time, with the authority that He has given to a person, individual person. I mean, for example, they always say that, ask this question, that if God already knows that I'm going to do a bad thing in future or a good thing in future, what is my authority on this act or saying what I will say? So how I know this, like, God way of knowledge is different, which we don't know, but how we can explain to a teenager? And,
Well, I think this is a very age-old question that is a philosophical question, and it relates to the famous debate which is called determinism and fatalism, which means that are we pre-programmed? Everything has been set as a destiny for us, or is it that we choose something? So the thing that the Quran tells us and gives us is something which is in between the two, and that is we do everything which is in our own capacity that we take as a decision. But whatever decision we will take or ultimately take or we will be taking in our future lives is known to God. So these are two independent things. We will do whatever we will do by our own will, by our own decision, by our own volition. But whatever decision we will take is known to God. In other words, His knowledge is not going to affect your decision making. His knowledge is independent of your decision making. And this is something you can explain to your teenagers by telling them that God has a property which is continuous. I mean, He is here and He's all the way up to the hereafter. So His knowledge is everywhere. He knows what's going to occur 1,000 years from now. He knows what occurred from the beginning of time. So if you look, if you draw a line, imaginary line, from the time that people were born, right up to the time that everything will die in the form of the day of hereafter, you'll know that God has knowledge of all these things. And this is a parallel line. And there is another parallel line in which mankind is progressing and doing things by taking a decision on its own. There are certain decisions which are made for a person, for example, the place he will be born, the parents, the country. So these are decisions on which no one questions, because we know that this is something which has been chosen by God. But there are other decisions which a person is going to take, that I'm going to get up in the morning, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to do this and do that. So that is like a line in which a person is doing these things. And because God is parallel to that line until the hereafter, He knows what's going on. So it's like just letting us ourselves know that the parallel line which we are going along is something which is known to God. He's standing outside that line, He's watching us, He knows what's going on, but He's not affecting us. He's not driving us to do these things. So basically, God's knowledge and our actions, they are two independent things.
Two independent things. Yeah. Can I add something additional to this question if you have time?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So, I mean, just to extend this option, when we try to explain especially the youth, the method that God has punished nation in the world. I think one of the examples that even Mr. Ghamidi are also explaining, that when those Jews who did not accept Hazrat Isa alayhi salam as a prophet, that generation was punished by the hands of people, like in case of Roman Empire, I think Titus Rumi, who captured them and destroyed them. So the logical question arises here, that since Allah already mentioned in the Quran that those people will be punished by my own powerful people, so then if Titus Rumi killed thousands of people and enslaved, how can we say that he did a crime and he will be responsible in Akhirah for his crimes by his own will? Because
I mean, this is something which God is telling us, that this is what Titus will do out of his own accord. But in the scheme of God, God is not going to stop him from doing this, because he is going to carry out something which God already wanted to have happened. He could have sent a cyclone, or maybe a tornado or an earthquake to destroy them, but instead he gave the reins of this attack to someone who was destined to actually decimate them. So, I mean, this is what God want. He could have done it in any other form. He did not interfere with this happening. So remember, Titus had his own plan to attack and dismember the temple. It is just that God did not stop him, because he was fulfilling God's own mission as well.
Mhm. So he will
And
still be
that's why in
responsible.
Surah Bani Israel, he's called Ibadan Lana Uli Ba'sin. He is
Correct.
like he's like my hand of death, God says. Although, of course, there were people who could not have belonged to the faction of God, but God has said that because the scourge that was delivered, the torment that was delivered, was in line with the punishment which was destined for such people, that when this lash of punishment fell, even though it was by someone who was, I mean, not a holy person, not a righteous person, God said it was my lash.
So, I mean, the point is, from our perspective, we will, acknowledge the two opposite type of thing that happen at the same time. That at the same time, we will always condemn Tutis because of his brutal action.
Yes.
Because, and at the same time, we also, admitted that it was a punishment from the God for those
Yes,
people.
of course.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, you see, what Titus did was on his own. I mean, he did something brutal, but that brutality is something which they asked for. So what is being said here is that this brutality would have been something that they would have faced anyway. It
Anyway,
maybe by an earthquake or by something like a natural disaster. But instead of that natural disaster, God had it let it happen through the
let it
hands
happen.
of, yes.
Okay, I got it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Imran Babar, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab.
Walaikum
Dr.
salam.
Saab, in a recent interview, uh, a question was asked to Ghamidi Saab that if a woman could be imam, could be appointed as an imam, and Ghamidi Saab's response was that there is no restriction in Quran or Sunnah to this effect. So it can be done.
Mhm.
So my question is that, is it enough for something to be permissible, just not being restricted in Quran or Sunnah, to be permissible?
Yes, of course. I mean, in the case of normal social matters, unless something is stopped, or unless there is a principle which stops it, I mean, you can stop a thing by pointing it out per se, or you can point it out a certain principle, and if that things fall under the ambit of that principle, you can say it is forbidden. And unless that is expressly done, especially in the case of worship rituals, we don't have. We just cannot go beyond that. Yes, of course, if someone says that, well, we have been asked to pray 5 prayers or offer 5 prayers, why don't we add some 2 extra prayers? Now this is something the person is doing by adding something to religion, and that is totally different. But when a person is conducting something which is part of religion, I mean, the woman is not going to conduct or offer an extra prayer. She's just going to be part of the same system that has been given. The only thing is the gender that we are commonly ascribed to such rituals has a change in it. So had there been some restriction in it, there would definitely have been a positively expressed, I would say, directive in the Quran or in the Sunnah that would have given us this idea that the leaders of all worship rituals must be men. And another thing that I'd like to point out here is that, you see, something which is allowed and something which is socially acceptable, these are two different things. So there are things which might be allowed, but they are not socially acceptable. So that also has some very powerful value. I mean, I can say that the Sharia does not stop it. Does not stop women to lead the prayers or to deliver the sermon, etc. But will that be socially acceptable to Muslims or the Muslim mindset? Obviously, we know that the answer would be in the negative. So the thing is that we must appreciate this part, that yes, if someone leads the prayer and she is a woman, as we know that there have been instances in which there are mosques in the US, specifically one of them, in which lady was the imam and she led the prayer, and there were men and women both standing behind her. So, as far as the Sharia is concerned, we are absolutely fine that she did nothing wrong. And people who were praying behind her, they accepted her as the imam. However, this is something which the greater Muslim community would perhaps not accept. So wherever this is not acceptable, it should not be done, because social acceptability is also something which is important. However, whenever it becomes socially acceptable, we can do it. So the Sharia does not stop it. It is the norms of the society that at times hinder it. So wherever those norms do not hinder it, if it is carried out, you will be doing something which is not against religion.
Doctor, my confusion on the matter was that on the same principle that something is not explicitly permissible, Ramli Sahib declares the whole Sufi tradition as parallel religion. At the same time, the same
No,
argument
that
is
is a.
used by
I
the
mean, let me
Brahmins.
just correct you here. That is not the reason is not what you just said. The reason is that whatever the Sufis say is against the Quran. I mean, the reason there is that the Tawheed that they express is not the one which the Quran says. The Nabuwat concept or the prophethood concept that they present is not what the Quran says. The concept of the hereafter, which the Quran says, they don't accept that. So you see, Tasawwuf or Sufism is something which is, when he says that it's a parallel religion, it is parallel because it goes against all the basic tenets and precepts of Islam.
Understood. And Doctor, also comment on Barelvi scholars. I mean, the other day somebody was asking them that, some of the practices that they do, where are they allowed? And he said, okay, show me where are they prohibited. So,
Okay, so that is something that has to be understood. You see, religious innovation, which is called bid'at, is something when you add something to the quantity, to the corpus of religion, and the thing which is added itself is religious. This is precisely what we call as a bid'at, or a religious, or an act of religious innovation, and that is something which is prohibited. So if the Barelvis, they call out the azan, or they say the rood before they call out the azan, or they do certain other things, because what they're doing is of religious nature. So saying that the rood is of the nature of religion, I mean, it is something that you can call to be religious, in inverted commas. So now they're adding a religious practice to the content of religion, and they're saying that this is something that should be done. And precisely this is what we call as bid'at, or innovation in religion, and that has to be avoided.
but Doctor, in itself, for example, let's say praying Durood before Azan. I mean, praying Durood is okay, Azan is okay. If they just do Durood before Azan, I mean, for some reason, I'm getting that Ramli Sahib is
See, what they
also.
are saying is, they're not saying that this is what they are doing. It is something which is part of religion. They say that unless you say the rood, you should not say the azan, because this is the proper way of declaring the azan, that you need to do it. So they make it a condition. It is here that we say, well, occasionally if you read the durood, you can read it anytime. You can read before the azan, after the azan, left, right, center. But when you say that this is a practice that has to be carried out at all cost, this is what makes it a bid'at.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question comes from Ammar Rasul. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab. Dr. Sahab, very recently I had this question in my mind where there is this talk by Ghamidi Sahib where he is talking about the nature of shirk that Bani Israel were doing, and they were asked, they don't prescribe to any other deities or gods, so why are they committing shirk? So he said that if you are following your scholars and you base your understanding of right and wrong based on their edicts, and which are going against God sometimes, or going against Sharia, that then you are giving them that status, and that is also shirk. And in that vein, he said something very interesting. He said that it is one of God's sunnahs that when you are looking for something and praying for something in your life for a really long time and God does not give it to you, if you go to some other person or some other deity to get the same thing, he will give it to you through that person or through that deity just to test you. And so, sir, I hope that I followed and understood what he said correctly, but if I am representing it correctly, then that I had two questions about that. One, is that sunnah of God, the way that he put it, clearly stated anywhere in the Quran? And secondly, doesn't that isn't that sort of like very astaghfirullah, for very high level gamesmanship or trickery even? That if a person has been praying for something all of his life, and God doesn't give it to him, but then he gets that thing from a stone or from a tree.
I think I did not. I've not watched this program or this particular segment that you're referring to, and I think that there has to be something different that might have not caught your attention,
Okay.
because this doesn't seem to be in conformity with what generally he says. And yes, I can say this, that this sunnah is not stated anywhere in the Quran, to the best of my knowledge, and I think there must be something more to it. And I can only comment once I'm able to watch or hear it.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Noshad Shafkat, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Surah Fatiha, last verse, Anamta alayhim, does it refer to one group or does it refer to three groups? One of those who follow God, one of those who broke his covenants, and one who went astray. Because I recently heard Dr. Khalid saying that this refers to one group.
As far as An'amta alayhim is concerned, yes, that would be one group, because they are referring to the people who would succeed in the hereafter. But right after that, we have Ghair al-Maghdub and we have Zaleen. So these are two other
Yes,
groups.
sir. That's right. That's what I wanted to know. That Ghair al-Maghdub and Walad
There are
Dhalin.
two other groups, and I'm sure Dr. Khalid also knows this very well. And so he must be referring to An'amta alayhim.
Right, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We have approximately 5 more minutes remaining, so if any of you have any last-minute question that you'd like to get in that's short and concise enough to fit the last few minutes, please go ahead.
I have a question.
Oh, please go ahead, Ahmed.
Alexa, my question is, we heard about that the progeny of Ibrahim is being distributed in Isaac and Ismail, that they have to take the leadership in their own way. My question is that in any way, because Ismail was older than 14 years from Isaac, so in any way, any point in the history, they have talked to each other that we are leading our nations, and we are taking the message of God, and you are on the Palestine and I am on the Makkah side. So have they have any conversation, if you can mention anywhere in the history?
Not to my knowledge. I don't think that this is something that has been reported. They might have conversed with each other. They might have even met, but that is something that has not been reported to the best of my knowledge in any historical source. And it is quite understandable. I mean, the mission that they had at their hands, of course, was something that was specific to their areas also. And Canaan, the old name of Palestine, and Hijaz, they are quite far apart as well. So, and because both of them were given a mission, it does seem that they focused themselves. But we don't have any. Even if there was some conversation or maybe some meeting between them, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think there is a record of that in history.
Anything in the Torah or anything in another book?
Not to the best of my knowledge.
So do you
But today
think
you have a ready reference. Just ask ChatGPT. It's a very strong source. Maybe it's going to give you an answer, but I don't think there is.
Now, do you think it's very strange that two brothers are not talking and they are taking?
No. You see, we have to understand one thing, and that is not everything that goes on is reported in scriptures. You see, there are so many things that might have gone on between the Prophet and the companions, and so many other conversations, but not everything is recorded. And this particularly, the era that you're talking about, it's prehistoric era. We don't have much knowledge about that era, but that doesn't mean that things did not take place. They did not. I mean, even if they were reported, I mean, there could be two there could be two options. Either they did happen and they were not reported, or they did not happen and therefore they were not reported. So this does not mean that if it was not reported, then they did not happen. They could have happened, but I mean they did not report it, because things which are ordinary, things which are, business as usual, as they say, they are not reported. You see, only unusual events, only things that make certain things prominent, they are reported.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Naushad Shafkat, please go ahead.
Dr. Saab, just a small question. In the incident in Surah Kahf, where Khizr kills a young boy while traveling with Moses, and later on it is discovered that he killed him because he would have grown up and brought disrepute to his parents, who were respected people. And of course, also that he would have become of the disbelievers. So, was this only to make it as a lesson for others and us? Otherwise, why would any child be allowed to grow up into being a bad person and bring disrepute to his family?
No, remember that when a child is allowed to grow up and be a bad person, this is not what God has destined for him. This is what He would choose for him. So the basic, I would say, purpose and objective of God in delineating these three incidents between Moses and Khizr was to let us know that things are not what they apparently seem. And you might think that that a child has died, and you would not know that the child was made to die, or this was the destiny of that child, because God did not want his parents to suffer at his hands. So, in the apparent sense, people would think that this is a matter of great tragedy that a 4-year-old boy has lost his life. But if you look at through the lens of God, you would see that even if something which is really very horrific has happened, you don't know that there is something hidden. It's like a blessing in disguise that might be there. So all these three incidents they are meant to give us this instruction. And I do think that these three incidents, they probably occurred in a dream shown to Moses, because the way they are described, I don't think that they are real-time incidents. It does look the way they have been described, that they were shown to Moses in the form of a vision, and the purpose was that he explained this vision or this dream in a way that he learns himself, and he can also make the Bani Israel or the Israelites learn. So remember, all these three incidents, they make you aware of the scheme of God, how we have to be patient, and how we have to just accept the will of God. So this was something specifically also for the Israelites, because they were the ones who were so, impatient. They were always complaining and had a very specific disposition. So it was basically for them that this probably a vision was shown to Moses, and it was also for him, because we also know that Moses himself had a bit of impatience in him. So that is what I gather. I'm not 100% sure, but it does seem that this incident took place, or these three incidents took place in his dream.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for this enlightening answer. So, what you would say is that Khizr was not the angel that we are told that he is, but it is all in a dream. Thank you.
Khizr is an angel, of course, but that he appeared in the form of a dream. He appeared otherwise he would have other assignments, but in that incident, he appeared to Moses in a dream.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem, for another very, very illuminating Q&A, and especially that long answer for Naushad Shafkat's question. I really enjoyed the answer, because in one way it showed us that the people that lived with Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they treated him as a normal person and didn't elevate him to like almost a godly status as some people I feel tend to do. So I really enjoyed that answer. Thank you very, very much. And thanks to all the participants for coming through and asking some very interesting and some very difficult questions. So thank you, and inshallah, We'll see y'all tomorrow in another session of textual study of the Quran. Until then, please take care. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.